Hello everyone, welcome to my fantasy and science fiction tier ranking. This is every fantasy series that I've read since about my teenage years, that I've read all of, or at least 2 books of, and in some cases DNF'ed at some point. So this is 37 series, mostly that I've read within the last few years, since I got back into science fiction and fantasy. It's ordered in terms of when I read them, so you'll get a sense for my kind of lifelong fantasy and science fiction reading journey here. And the tiers are starting with my S tier is Heart and Soul. So this is where the books gripped me completely, but also got me really emotionally invested as well. My second tier, my A tier is Captivating. These were books that gripped me almost all the way through. Really great, consistent series for me, but maybe didn't have that same level of emotional investment. Then my B tier is going to be Mostly Engaging, where books that I either gave all 4 or 5 stars to, where maybe there were things that just didn't work for me as well as my favorite series. And then this tier is where I start to get upset, because it's pretty easy for me to love books and to love a series. So if the author made it into this tier, then I'm pretty sorry that I read it, sorry that I wasted my time, and wished I would have DNF'd. And so this category down here is either things I was not feeling at the time, maybe want to come back to, or that I thought the quality was so low that it wasn't worth continuing on to finish book 1 or past book 1. So here we go. The first major fantasy series I've read was Harry Potter, and this is an easy one. I grew up with Harry and the gang. I was probably in 3rd grade when I read the first 3 books, and then it was a big deal every time a new book came out, and I just was an emotional wreck at the end of books 5, 6, and 7, and so I was very invested in this and reread it a few times, and so that one definitely is in the Heart and Soul category. Eragon, I thought, another great kids fantasy series that's popular. I couldn't make it through book 2. I tried multiple times, but was so bored in book 2, and even my 12-year-old self could sense how much of a ripoff this was from Star Wars. And I was a huge Star Wars movie fan growing up, so this just felt derivative and boring. So never made it through Eragon. I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in high school, and I liked it. I don't think satirical, humorous fantasy is really ever going to be my favorite, but I was definitely engaged through most of it. But now I can't remember much of it besides a few key jokes. So, yeah, go Mostly Engaging. Now, Hyperion, that one, I definitely loved book 1. Book 1 probably would be Captivating, but didn't love book 2, and I didn't care enough to even continue in this world into the next kind of series. So, I'll put it in Mostly Engaging. Foundation Trilogy, this was kind of disappointing. It's supposed to be this touchstone of classic sci-fi, and didn't really love book 1, but definitely got more into it in books 2 and 3, but I eventually kind of just flamed out around book 5, Foundation and Earth, and I don't consider it a DNF because I just didn't get around to the last 2 sequels, but definitely an inconsistent reading experience there, and the last book I did not really care for that I read. So just meh for Foundation. Now Ringworld, oh god. That was an atrocity. That is in contention for the worst book I've ever read. Just nothing there with the characters, nothing interesting going on with the plot. I stuck it out until we got to the actual Ringworld, and thinking that it would be interesting at that point, but it was so anticlimactic. He just did nothing with this cool premise of a giant ring world. So super disappointing there, and I would recommend that no one goes back and try that one. Old Man's War by John Scalzi. This one, I liked it a lot when I read it, but I have so little memory for almost all of these books. I'm going to put it at the top of meh. I definitely liked the first book a lot and liked the premise, but he didn't do a whole lot with it after, and there's a bunch of books that were nice, okay reads, but really kind of forgettable. So going into my C tier. The Three Body Problem. Ooh, this one was the start of my reading renaissance. When I read this one, I was gripped to those pages, especially for books 2 and 3. And not too long after I finished reading those, I reread books 2 and 3. I liked them so much. I won't put them in Heart and Soul because the characters here, there's not a lot to get invested in. So my emotions probably weren't too invested, but I was utterly gripped in terms of the plot, the ideas. I could not have been more captivated by this one. And then Mistborn, the start of my fantasy renaissance. So it took me a lot of years to come back to fantasy after the failure of Aragon. But when I got back in, I couldn't have loved this one more. I was just invested in the main characters, the side characters, the plotting, the ending just absolutely blew me away and got me emotional. And this is one that I have reread once and it held up, and one that I think I'll be returning to a lot over the course of my life. I then went right into Mistborn Era 2 and definitely liked it a lot, but my emotions probably did not get as invested. So I'm going to throw it in captivating there. I liked Mistborn Era 2 a lot more than a lot of other people, but we'll go into my A tier. Temeraire. Ooh, I really liked Temeraire. This almost historical fiction, just alternate history, but with dragons that are verbal and intelligent, kind of integrated into all these different places in the world. And so I am thinking I'm going to go at the top of captivating, maybe under Three Body Problem. So this is 9 books, and maybe there was a book in the middle that dragged a little bit, and there was one plot line towards the end that I didn't love, but that was only lasted for half a book. So overall, I was totally gripped. I read these 9 books really quickly, and for fans of historical fiction and fantasy, this is a great kind of melding of the two. Just Napoleonic Wars with dragons, and a lot of really interesting travel that goes on around the world in this series too. So, love Temeraire, and I'm very interested to eventually get around to rereading it. The Magician's Trilogy by Lev Grossman. I really liked this one. This is one of the first fantasy series I actually did through audio, and I was really gripped by Mark Bramhall's narration. I thought he just understood the nuances of these characters really deeply. I'm thinking I'll go maybe under Temeraire. That's a tough one, but it's 3 pretty short books, and it's a kind of a adult riff on Harry Potter and Chronicles of Narnia, but it goes off on its own way and just is so unpredictable. I found the characters really compelling, and the audiobooks especially really captivating. All right, now back to Brandon Sanderson with The Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive. I read the first 3 of these in a row, not too long after Mistborn, and I was absolutely invested in this one. I think I'm gonna move Harry Potter over here. So, Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, I was super invested. Rhythm of War was more of the same for me. I loved all 4 of these books, and really, I can't wait to see what's going to happen in book 5 and beyond. So that one is definitely an all-time favorite. And then after that, I followed that up with listening to mostly audio for the Dresden Files, and I loved it. Loved it from pretty early on, too. From the start of book 1, I was really into it, and then the stakes kept on getting higher, the world kept on expanding. By book 7, 8, 9, 10, changes just blew me away, but I loved the books after that almost just as much, with Ghost Story and Cold Days and Skin Game. and Battleground recently was incredible. So I really, really am invested in Harry and a lot of those main side characters. So love Dresden Files. Then I was on a roll until I hit Lightbringer. I was looking for other things that Cosmere readers were reading, and this was huge disappointment. I really liked book 1. It was fast-paced, exciting. I thought it set up an interesting world and had some interesting characters to work with, and the action really used the magic in really cool ways. But it was a pretty slow descent into a horror show by the end with book 4 and 5. Weeks, I think, just had no clue how to end his series, and he couldn't resist from expanding things way too far and making it incredibly anticlimactic. I just wish I had not been reading this for a couple months and wasting my time. I will never read anything else Brent Weeks writes, with how much I no longer trust his ability to take me on a cathartic, satisfying journey. And then I tried some Mark Lawrence for the first time, Red Sister, and it was okay, but I didn't get very far into it before I DNF'd, because it just hadn't gripped me. I was pretty bored with the kind of school setting. I know this one I probably would like if I gave it more of a chance and got into book 2 probably and got a little further. So I'm going to probably go back and try this one again, but certainly higher quality than these two. So I'm going to keep it at the top of that tier. And then First Law. First Law, I did entirely on audio because Stephen Pacey is a god. I'll probably go with this at the top of my A tier. It wasn't flawless for me. I didn't love Best Served Cold. That kind of revenge story got a little repetitive and didn't love the main character Manza in that one. But other than that, it was almost 5-star books across the board. Loved the first trilogy. The Heroes might be one of my single favorite books of all time. I liked Red Country. Really liked the newer trilogy. And so with Stephen Pacey kind of providing outstanding narration the whole time, I was utterly captivated. But I probably am a larger fan at heart of heroic, more optimistic fantasy. And so I probably wasn't as emotionally invested in First Law as I was with a lot of these in the top tier. So it'll stay at the top of my A tier for now. Then I did the Farsier Trilogy, which I liked a lot, but I gave all 4 stars across the board. I think if I continue, or when I continue in Realm of the Elderlings, that I'll probably feel more strongly about Fitz and the series on the whole. But right now I liked it. Was not gripped by parts of book 3, and the overall kind of antagonist and villain wasn't really doing much for me. So I think though that I'm gonna like some of the later series in Realm of the Elderlings a bit more. And then I tried out The Witcher. This was a DNF. I DNF'd it pretty far into The Last Wish, that first book of short stories. I had watched the show and really liked season 1 of the show. Never done the video game before. And this book the stories just were boring me. I just felt like I could watch the show and be happy with The Witcher. John Gwynn's Faithful and the Fallen. Where do you think it's gonna go? If you guessed S tier, you were right. I fell in love with Faithful and the Fallen. I read them back to back really quickly, was utterly emotionally invested in everything, the high stakes, the characters you knew weren't always safe. I loved pretty much every character and hated the ones that you were supposed to hate very viscerally. And that series is an all-time favorite, and I think one that I will definitely be returning to in the future. Loved the action. Just so many things I love about that series. All right, then Evan Winter's The Burning series. So I've only read the first 2 that are out, Rage of Dragons and Fires of Vengeance. and I really like them. I think it will go under, maybe above Farsier Trilogy. I did this one just in audio again because the narrator Prentice Oniemi is another one who is just S tier with bringing the emotion, the performance in every line. And I think this is one also that has the potential to jump up as the next couple books come out, because I think he improved a lot with book 2 as a new author. And I'm into the character's journey. I'm loving the world building, and it feels quite unique in a lot of respects to a lot of these other ones. So I'm excited to see where this one goes. I did Brandon Sanderson's 3 Legion novellas. I know that there's maybe another one out, or there's a bunch more coming out that he's not really going to be writing himself. These are short little novellas that are kind of sci-fi fantasy. They were okay. I liked them, but they're a little forgettable. So I think this will go at the end of mostly engaging. I definitely enjoyed reading it. I'm not sorry that I read them, but they're pretty forgettable. They're just more short popcorn style reads if you need a little something to divert you. And then the Faithful and the Fallen sequel series of Blood and Bone by John Gwynne. This one almost was inevitably a letdown since there was a time jump and we couldn't follow the same characters that I had really grown to love. So this one I'll probably put in mostly engaging. I loved the finale. Book 3 was probably not as engaged by parts of book 1 and 2, but it was still all part of the same world that I felt very connected to from Faithful and the Fallen, but definitely a little bit of a letdown. All right, and then the Bobaverse books by Dennis Taylor. These are ones I did fully on audio, and they'll probably go somewhere in mostly engaging, maybe under here. So I've liked all these. It's a trilogy of pretty short books that really is one story, and then one longer one that came afterward. And I didn't love that 4th one that's longer, but I was more captivated by the trilogy, and the audio by Ray Porter is fantastic. This is pretty serious, hard sci-fi. I don't know where it gets the rep that it is very humorous sci-fi, but it's more like the same tone of Andy Weir's books with The Martian or Project Hail Mary, where it's a very serious plot going on, where there's a main character or POVs who, can crack jokes or make pop culture references here and there, but still very serious, hard sci-fi, and I liked it a lot. And then the Rhyria Revelations by Michael Sullivan. These I liked a lot. I didn't love them, but probably will say under here. I really liked the ending. I thought by books 5 and 6, it's a 6-book series, that he really ended strongly and brought a lot of things together and showed that he was tightly plotting this series from the beginning. And a lot of the character work really shined in those last couple. The first 4, there was a lot of fun kind of aspects to them, but not as good as the ending there. So a little inconsistent, but liked it pretty much it all the way through. Murderbot. I've enjoyed most of these. Probably put it here in mostly engaging. I really didn't love book 1. Book 1 is just not as compelling as the rest, and the series really comes to its own when Murderbot starts meeting and interacting with other non-human characters. Book 1 I'd recommend just kind of powering through as a kind of prologue that's a little clunkily written, but I think Martha Wells really hits her stride with the next few novellas. And didn't love the novel length one. I was used to the shorter format with these, but now she's written another novella more recently, and so I'm excited to see where this goes. Malazan, Book of the Fallen. This one is tough for me to rank because it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride. I think I'll put it here at the end of my A tier. So if it was just books 1 through 6, this would probably be higher, but I didn't love parts of Reaper's Gale, and Toll the Hounds just didn't work for me too well, and I didn't particularly love a lot of Crippled God and how the series on the whole ended, but parts of the first 6 are just some of the best things I've ever read, and definitely captivated me, and ones I want to go back and reread, and I think if I go back later on and I'm older and reread this whole series, that it'll probably jump up. But going captivating for now. And then Ianc Esselmont's Novels of the Malazan Empire. So this was interesting. I decided to read these intertwined with Erickson's Book of the Fallen books, and I think that was a mistake. I should have just treated them as separate series. I really liked the first one, Knight of Knives, but did not like the first Crimson Guard book, which came next, and then was okay with Stonewielder. Then really loved Orb Scepter Throne, which is kind of like a sequel standalone to Toll the Hounds, but then really didn't like the last 2 Crimson Guard books, Blood and Bone and Assail. So this one's going in inconsistent, because a couple of the books I really loved, but a couple of them are some of the worst reads of my life, so very inconsistent here. And I think he's a really powerful author, though, and really liked what he did in some of these books, so I'm very excited to read the prequel trilogy that he did about a few of the main characters. And then we have The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. This one was spectacularly bad. I made it through most of book 1 before I kind of gave up. This is kind of an alternate historical fiction. Really not much sci-fi here, but I just did not buy the authenticity of the historical time period. It felt like a ripoff of the much superior movie Hidden Figures. And, this one was a brutal read. Now The Poppy War by Rf Quang. I liked book 1 a lot, but was very disappointed by books 2 and 3. So I think I'll put this one about here. This one was inconsistent for me. I thought book 1 showed a lot of promise, but did not think where it went was too compelling. A lot of the plot lines kind of dropped off. I did not really like the very end with the main character, and did not think there was much interesting plotting or character work with the secondary characters especially. They felt very one-dimensional. So I think, though, Quang has a lot of potential, and I'm really excited for Babel coming up soon, which I think is going to be more in her wheelhouse, dark academia. Red Rising. Where is this one going to go? It's going to go in Heart and Soul. I plowed through these books, the first trilogy, in, I think, 1 week. I just could not put them down. It was wonderful and gripping from near the start of book 1. Once we get out of the mines and the inciting incident for the whole series happens, it was off to the races for me. I love book 1 much more than I think most Red Rising fans, and book 2 upped it even more. Loved book 2 and 3, and I have not yet gone into the sequel trilogy. I was waiting a little bit until the next book comes out, so I'm going to jump into that one probably in the not too distant future. And absolutely love Red Rising. Shadows of the Apt by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So I was a little scared of this series with it being 10 books, and the name made it very intimidating, but this is really accessible, fast-paced, creative, high fantasy, kind of a little steampunk. I loved these 10 books, almost all of them too. It was so consistent. This one's gonna go at the top of captivating. The action in this one is tense and and really suspenseful. I came to care about a lot of the characters, but I wouldn't say that I got too emotionally invested, which is keeping it from that top tier, but rarely did I ever find myself bored. I was just engaged in every book and really hope that this series gets read more widely, because I think a lot of Brandon Sanderson and John Gwynne fans will like this series, Shadows of the Apt. Just a spectacular 10-book series that moves so quickly. Here is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. So I wish that I had read this back when I was a teenager, or at least started reading it back then. I came to it pretty late in life, but I still really liked it. It's a little bit inconsistent, of course, with some books, but I still really liked it. I'll probably go after the Magician's Trilogy ahead of Malazan. I think Crossroads of Twilight had few sections in it that bored me a little bit, and the character work is always not as deft as you would like it, and maybe occasionally there's a little more description than I would have liked. But this is the type of fantasy, this kind of epic fantasy, where you're very close in with the characters in terms of psychic distance. You're with them with their thoughts and emotions and following their whole arcs really closely. I think I just overall like that style more than the Malazan book, The Fallen style. But that was executed so well that they're very comparable series for me. Now, this is the Rhyria Chronicles by Michael Sullivan, the prequel kind of standalone books to the Rhyria Revelations. And these have not been very good. Big meh. I haven't DNF'd because I'm gonna keep up, because I've read 3 out of the 4 that are currently out, and I kind of liked the second one. The first one that shows Royce and Hadrian's kind of circumstances of their meeting for the first time was really anticlimactic and done awkwardly. Book 3, Death of Dulgoth, was a huge bore for me, and this one has not been going very well so far. Nor has Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne captivated. I probably will put it above Old Man's War, because it's more memorable than that one. I read it more recently, though. But this one is pretty meh all the way through. I was hopeful in the first one that maybe some things were set up that were interesting, but none of those promises were kind of delivered on in a really satisfying way. Never really cared about any of the characters, and didn't think the plotting was very impressive. The world building wasn't very original. The one original element, the giant kestrel birds, was barely utilized. There was not a lot here to latch on to that is going to be memorable or very positive. I kind of wish that I had never tried that one and read it all the way through. And then Cradle, I think that's going to go, maybe at the end of mostly engaging, or even, it's too inconsistent for me. So I kind of liked book 1 and thought, okay, this progression fantasy thing, it's moving very quickly. There's a lot going on in the world building I don't understand, but I was kind of into it. But book 2 just, I hated. And book 3 was a little improvement, but I did not like book 4 or 5. And it wasn't until book 6 that the series started to really get good for me. And I was very engaged by books 6 through 10. And then the more recent one, though, Dread God, felt like another step back. And so this series has kind of just been overall very middling. And I don't know that this subgenre is going to be my favorite, but I can see why it has so many extremely passionate fans. But the character work and the world building and just the overall level of description left a lot for me to be desired. I could barely picture a lot of what was happening. A lot of it just felt kind of random and video game-ish or like anime. And I've never been a big RPG player or anime watcher, so I'm probably not the target audience for Cradle. But I think I am the target audience for the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio. Only the first 4 books are out, along with a couple novellas, but I'm going to put this at near the top of captivating. I think it has the potential to get up into S tier once the last couple books are out and I can see the whole arc of the series. But I have loved my journey in this series so far and have been absolutely gripped to the page almost all the way through these long books. And so can't wait to see where that one's going. All right, so there it is. There's all the fantasy and science fiction series I've read. Now you have a sense for my reading taste, what I love, what I don't. Let me know in the comments other series that aren't on here that you think I might really love based on my tier list here, or ones you think I maybe should avoid. Let me know where you really agree or disagree with me. And this hopefully you'll have an idea now of how my tastes coincide with yours. I'll see you later.